Hello everyone, Loremaster of Sotek here, and today is a pretty exciting day. Creative Assembly put out a new post for the Tiger Warriors to basically give information on what's coming in the pack and everything, but I don't really care about that because obviously we know what's in it, and if you've dropped by any of the live streams, you know what's in it. I'll be talking more about that kind of in a separate video where I'll be going over, I guess, a review of sorts. But before Lorebeard's live stream, which may come out before this video does, depending on things, they actually gave us significantly more lore information about the Tiger Warriors on a post here that, between you and me, I think was actually supposed to come out months back, letting you behind the curtain of smidge. There was a bit of a funny incident where when they originally were going to announce Bhashiva and the Tiger Warriors, it was supposed to come side by side with a Games Workshop article that basically was going to be like, oh, Creative Assembly is going to show off what Bhashiva looks like, and they're going to show off like the Tiger Warrior Claw Speaker and some other stuff, and then Games Workshop was going to release their own article over on the Warhammer community page that was going to be like, oh look, here's all the Tiger Warrior lore. And then hilariously, Creative Assembly released theirs, and like in the content creator program, we obviously got early access to the Creative Assembly announcement and the article and everything, and we were like, oh, cool. And then they told us, oh, okay, Games Workshop is going to release an article that's going to have like a bunch of stuff. And then Games Workshop releases their article the same day. I'm super excited. I mean, y'all know me. Warhammer lore is like my bread and butter. It's what keeps me on this earth. And I go over there to look at the article, and Games Workshop, all they did was post up a picture of a Tiger Warrior. Granted, it was a picture we hadn't seen yet, but they post up a picture of a Tiger Warrior, and we're like, oh yeah, Tiger Warriors. Woo! And that's it. That was all they said. They didn't say anything else. There was no lore. There was no information. It was like GW was supposed to put something out, and then they waited until the last second, and they just threw up like a PNG of a Tiger Warrior concept art and called it a day. Oh, but I am very, very pleased that Creative Assembly has finally released an article that's coming with significantly more information. So I'm going to be talking about it here in this video, and then we'll kind of go from there. I'm basically just going to skip to the interesting bits where we have all of the lore, and I will read that out because it is a considerable amount of information. There will be a Lorebeard stream where me and Andy will be breaking this down hard, and we'll be going into what works, what doesn't, what's good, what's bad. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and read this, and let's see where it takes us. The Tiger Warriors are a proud and ancient martial culture whose origins greatly predate their presence in Grand Cathay. According to their own legends, they were created by the Old Ones, and once dwelt in the lands known as End. That age came to a brutal end when chaos swept across the world and the Old Ones vanished. In that moment of ruin, their people were saved by Kamau, their great chieftain, who defied Tzeentch himself. Through unwavering loyalty, nobility of spirit, and refusal to yield to deception, Kamau overcame the demon's trickery. His valor became the defining moment of Tiger Warrior history, forging an unbreakable hatred of chaos, beastmen, and above all, the servants of Tzeentch. In the long aftermath of that cataclysm, a prophecy emerged among the Tiger Warrior tribes of the Highlands. It foretold the coming of the White Tiger, who would one day lead their people to salvation. The first White Tiger fulfilled this prophecy, uniting the clans and leading them across the mountains of heaven. Some tribes settled within the mountains themselves, but many pressed on into the western deserts and the lands ruled by the Iron Dragon. There, the White Tiger swore loyalty to the Western Master, establishing a bond that has endured for centuries. Since that time, each White Tiger has taken up the mantle of her predecessor, renewing those ancient oaths generation after generation. Okay, so already we have a couple of really interesting tidbits here. I thought this was already the case, but this seems to confirm that every single White Tiger is female, which in and of itself is extremely interesting. It's, I would say, probably quite likely that the White Tigers are a matriarchal line. It might be a bloodline, but it could be just a spiritual reincarnation. One thing I find unique here is that it says that the Tiger Warriors, according to their own legends, were created by the Old Ones. This isn't God voice, so to speak. This is not Games Workshop or the narrator telling us, oh yeah, they're definitely a Old One species. This is the Tiger Warriors saying, no, 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 we were created by the Old Ones, which I do find rather fascinating, because at the end of the day, that could not necessarily be true. It could be that they were actually created by chaos, and that they simply refuse to admit it or believe it because maybe they think that would make them lesser. I find that very, very suspicious, but I'm not saying it's definitely not true. I'm just saying that I think that's a very interesting choice that leaves some very interesting fuzziness and wiggle room. The other thing I find very interesting is they talk about Kamau overcoming the demon's trickery, and they use the singular of demon's trickery, so like the possessive. The curious thing there is Tzeentch is not a true entity, right? Like, you can't really fight Tzeentch or have like a big conversation with Tzeentch. It is an entity of the ether that can't manifest in the physical world in any deeper truth. To me, this almost feels like that Kamau fought against perhaps a deal holder that represented Tzeentch. So perhaps a Lord of Change or a Demon Prince or some other notable great figure that the Tiger Warriors might remember as Tzeentch. Like, they think that is Tzeentch personified. But that wouldn't really make sense for how Tzeentch works. And Kamau seems to very much be a physical entity who actually fought something, and he left behind like all these great relics. There's something definitely there, because it definitely feels like they're conflating a particular individual with the god Tzeentch. There's a lot of fun theory crafting we can do there. I'm not gonna worry too much about it right now. I do like that the Beastmen are included in being very, very deeply hated by the Tiger Warriors. I will note that if the Tiger Warriors were a chaos elevated species, so if they were humans that mutated or were like fused with nearby tigers, or tigers that mutated into tiger men, the idea that they would feel great shame and loathing at the process they went through, and that they would refuse to associate with chaos and instead have built the idea that no, we were an Old One species, is very, very interesting, because either way, their legends clearly state that they were yoked by chaos and then Kamau broke them free of it, which is super duper duper interesting. Of course, we then have the notes about the prophecy. I find the prophecy super fascinating and about like when it originated, because it says the long aftermath of the cataclysm, and then they go into the deserts, which means that the Great Maw already happened. There is a pretty lengthy chunk of time between the end of the cataclysm and the arrival of the Great Maw that creates the Warpstone Desert. There are different ways they could tackle that. I'm curious exactly when the very first White Tiger would have manifested. I'd have to check the dates, but a part of me wonders if the first White Tiger showed up during Sigmar's time. The first White Tiger was heralded by the twin-tailed comet that heralded Sigmar's birth and the manifestation of Sotek, because that would then be like the Eastern event that deeply ties in with the twin-tailed comet. The far Western event being Sotek, and then the Old World event being the birth of Sigmar, and then the Eastern event perhaps being the coming of the first White Tiger. I really, really hope that maybe Tiger Warriors will be coming to the tabletop game sooner rather than later. We'll get an arcane journal with like a timeline, and maybe they'll give us like a Zhao Ming model, and then we'll get to see the White Tiger during Asvar Kul's time and see who she is, which would be really, really cool. I do personally love a lot that the White Tigers are a matriarchal concept. That's very, very unique. Continuing on, we have, it was through this journey that the Tiger Warriors ultimately settled in Western Cathay. They entered the Iron Dragon's domain not as a conquered people, but as allies bound by honor. Though they serve Zhao Ming, their truest loyalty lies first with the White Tiger herself and with Kamau, whom they revere as both god and eternal exemplar. The current White Tiger is known as Bhashiva, the Desert Tigress, one of the lords of Shangyang, who is the chosen leader of her kind. This dual allegiance gives the Tiger Warriors a unique place within Grand Cathay. Though they are not truly Cathayan, their presence is woven deeply into the fabric of the nation. They fight alongside Cathayan armies, guard caravans, and garrison distant outposts with unwavering resolve while retaining their own traditions, command structures, and ways of war. They are allies bound by oath and honor, not decree. So here we have the major concept that, of course, that they are a mercenary force, that they are not truly Cathayan. They choose to fight along Cathay by choice. They seem to have a very good relationship with Zhao Ming, as they constantly are renewing their oaths to him with each new white tiger that jumps up. I also find it very, very interesting that within the DLC itself, we get a pretty significant amount of lore that shows that Zhao Ming does not really command the Tiger Warriors as much as he's very, very good at manipulating them. He's very good at playing on their sense of honor, their sense of fulfilling oaths and remaining bound to those oaths, and using that relationship to get the Tiger Warriors to do what he wants. A little further down, this independence is most clearly embodied in the Tiger Court, established when the Iron Dragon entrusted the White Tiger with the authority to oversee her own people. The court serves as the heart of Tiger Warrior governance. It is not a formal ruling body, nor one steeped in ceremony. Instead, it is a council of commanders tasked with maintaining order among their kind and ensuring they continue to abide by the laws of Grand Cathay. Each mercenary company governs itself, with its leader responsible for discipline, justice, and the conduct of their warriors. The Tiger Court intervenes only when disputes escalate or grievances cannot be resolved on their own. Okay, that is super duper duper interesting. They're quite literally mercenary forces, where each Sawai is basically in charge of his own people, his own company. But then amongst the companies, they have this ruling body that will only gather to deal with really specific instances. So you can imagine that if something happened between a Tiger Warrior company and, say, Cathayan citizens or Cathayan settlement, there would be attempts for the company to try and resolve it themselves. But if they can't, due to perhaps they don't agree with the Cathayans on how it should be acknowledged or something like that, it seems like what the Tiger Court mainly exists to do is to deal with issues between tiger companies, but also to deal with instances where the personal laws and rules of the tiger companies conflicts with the laws of Grand Cathay. And the Tiger Court exists mainly to enforce the laws of Grand Cathay so that they abide by their agreements with Zhao Ming and keep things civil. This last one says, culturally, the Tiger Warriors are fierce yet chivalrous, valuing discipline and valor over cruelty or excess. This philosophy shapes both their conduct in war and their relationships beyond it. Nowhere is this contrast clearer than in their deep-seated disdain for ogres. Crude, gluttonous, and driven by selfish gain, they embody everything the Tiger Warriors despise. Though the two may, on rare occasions, fight under the same banners in the Western provinces, it is a matter of absolute necessity rather than trust. For the Tiger Warriors, honor is as vital as victory, and every battle is fought in the shadow of Kamao's enduring example. That's really, really, really interesting. So A, I'm super happy we're finally getting a lore note for why they hate the ogre so much. With Bhashiva, your campaign literally starts with you killing ogres, and there is a whole thing in her skill tree about how she gets bonuses to fighting against all the forces of chaos and ogres. She really doesn't like ogres. And here we see that they have a very honor-obsessed culture. Something I actually particularly like about this is what we're seeing here is basically the Eastern equivalent, you could somewhat argue, to dwarfs. Although they're mercenaries, they have a very, very, very strict moral code. What I like about this a lot is I think it would be easy to fall into the trap of being like, oh, well, they're just super good guys. They're just super duper good guys. And I don't really think that's what it is. I think it's that they have an incredibly strict, deep, intrinsic, built-in culture that revolves around maintaining honor no matter what, because they see that as their way of resisting corruption, which likely ties back to the situation of Kamau dealing with whatever that entity he fought that represented Tzeentch, essentially. I think what is being laid down there is that for the Tiger Warriors, they likely have something very deep in their nature that seems to scare them. Perhaps like that animalistic, bestial urge that lurks in like the deep part of their soul. And they believe the only way to keep things in check the thing to keep their souls safe is honor without exception. That's a very interesting concept to pair with being mercenaries that fight for groups and cultures other than their own, and that they hold themselves to these very, very, very strict, this almost martial lifestyle. It just screams resisting corruption at all costs. To me, this once again seems to lean very, very much into this almost conspiracy idea that I feel like is being laid between the lines, that the Tiger Warriors are deeply, deeply terrified of falling to corruption, of losing themselves, and once more being hitched under the yoke of chaos to lose what Kamau broke free for them. I once again can't help but feel that this almost seems to suggest that they are beastmen, or they were beastmen that had a extraordinary individual who broke them free. They are deeply, deeply committed through any means necessary to ensure that they are never enslaved again, which is a very, very interesting story, and that's a very unique story. Even if they were an Old One creation race, like the earlier tidbit says, or the Tiger Warriors themselves purport to be, the fundamental core narrative that seems to revolve around their species is that this is a species that belonged to the Dark Gods, and they got free of it, at least allegedly. This also kind of, to me, screams a potential situation of, like, you could almost see there being like some big horrible reveal during the end times that they're not actually free, or they're not as free as they thought they were, and it leads to some great terrible reveal that has to do with like the situation of the White Tiger or whatever. From there we go on to, they talk a bit about gameplay stuff. Not gonna worry about that. Oh, Taoyan. Okay, so, oh, nice. Okay, we've got Taoyan lore. Taoyan, a favored general of the Iron Dragon. Taoyan is a hated name in the central provinces, where she cruelly put down the rebellious children of Yin Kuei. The uprising was poised to engulf the Celestial Heartlands with followers of the false Empress. That's super interesting. When the Jade Dragon called upon Taoyan and her armies to crush them. Such was the bloody fate of the rebels and Taoyan's heavy-handed response that the Jade army refused to serve with her and exiled her to the west. There, the Iron Dragon quickly recognized Taoyan's talents and offered her a place as a Lord of Shangyang. Ruthless and cunning, Taoyan has proved equal to the task of defending the western borders of the Empire, though secretly she covets revenge against the politicians and generals who ousted her and a return to her place among the Dragon Emperor's armies. That is very, very interesting. This is something I actually talked about on stream because I hadn't seen this lore blurb until now because we didn't get it. This is the first thing we've actually gotten about Taoyan other than what's introduced with her in game. And in game, there's a decent amount of little dialogue tidbits about the rebellion of Yin Kuei and how Taoyan hated them. And we didn't know what that was on stream, what this whole Yin Kuei thing is, but I was sitting there going, okay, well, that's literally just the reverse of Kuei Yin, which Kuei Yin is the Moon Empress. That's her actual name. Because, you know, yin yang, Kuei Yin. Yin Kuei is an entity known as the False Empress who caused an uprising. That is incredibly interesting. That doesn't seem like a chaos cult. And when you read about the uprising and the little tidbits about Taoyan, nothing about it screams chaos. It seems to have been like a political movement, or a rebellion among the peasantry, or like cities that seeked to break free of the control of the dragons. But to me, it seems like there was some woman or individual that convinced a significant amount of people in the Celestial Heartlands to rise up against the dragons for some deep foundational reason. This will probably be something we focus on significantly over on Lorebeards. There's such a fascinating story hidden under that. The thing that jumps out at me is that the rebellion seems like it was relatively sympathetic, that when Yuan Bo sent Taoyan to crush them, he sent her to put an end to this rebellion. Likely capture and or kill this false empress and to bring the rebellion to an end. But when she learned the truth of it, when she got there to deal with these rebels, her response was so brutal, because it's noted in her little blurb that she hated these people and that she saw them as the worst, deepest kind of traitors, and she tortured them and put them down in such an overzealous, brutalist fashion, caused so much death and destruction that all of the other Cathayans that were serving alongside her said, no, you went too far, you did too much, you are evil. And to me, that is fascinating, because the Cathayans have done some cruel things to their own people in order to maintain the control of the dragons. We've seen the whole thing of like Miao Ying deliberately allowing a chaos invasion through the Great Bastion to just prevent the Great Bastion itself from being damaged, and allowing tons and tons of people to be like just torn apart and murdered and sacrificed to the dark gods and other horrible nonsense, just so she could lure them into an easier trap and protect the wall that's supposed to be the thing that protects the people. So the idea that Taoyan did something so bad that the Jade Army refused to fight alongside her, and she was ultimately exiled. To me, I don't think she would have successfully been exiled without Yuan Bo's approval. Now, it could be that Yuan Bo didn't really care, but the Jade Army was like, nope, we're not fighting alongside her. Like, she's a monster. She's terrible. Perhaps that was enough for Yuan Bo to basically throw up his hands and say, all right, fine. Like, fine, she's gone. She's gone. I'll exile her. But then she goes west and gets picked up by Zhao Ming, which, this potentially adds like a really nice grating conflict between brother dragons, if you want to view it that way, of like if Yuan Bo was very much not happy with her and saw her response as grotesque, that he exiled her from Grand Cathay only for his brother to turn around and basically like flip him the finger and be like, oh nope, okay, you don't want her, she's mine now. War criminal, yep, I'll hire her, which would be a really, really bad look for Yuan Bo and Zhao Ming. Like, that's embarrassing. But you could also view it as a clever manipulation by Yuan Bo, getting a potential rebellion under control by exiling a very, very skilled commander who went too far, and basically sending her to his brother, knowing that she would be picked up, in which case she would still be able to serve Grand Cathay and would still be a useful tool for the dragons, just in a way that would calm those forces in the central provinces, who are perhaps more civilized folk, or at least not as desperate as the people in the west. I do really, really like that we have the whole thing that where Taoyan is excelling as a Lord of Shangyang. She wants to get revenge and either remove or kill politicians and generals who were like, nah, bitch, you went too far. And she wants to go back to the central provinces. So there's like a really interesting situation there, like just a very human character. I love Taoyan very, very much because she is so important for helping demonstrate that Cathay is not some perfect fantasy land. It's like, oh, it's so perfect and harmonious and all the humans are so happy to work for the dragons and nothing bad here happens here. And this is like a multi-layered mess of a cake that just shows how humans get a human, and how the dragons are either fighting amongst each other or they're very, very heavily manipulating situations. And they're like, oh, we have this war criminal who brutally massacred so many people that all of these other people who are very loyal to us refuse to fight alongside her. Instead of like enacting justice and making sure she's no longer a threat to the world or holding her accountable for her crimes, nope, we're just gonna send her to join another army where she just continues to be a very high-ranking member. Like, even if she's been technically demoted a bit, she's still like a very powerful, notable figure that has troops under her command, and she's going on to perpetuate her crimes in just a different part of the empire on different people. Fascinating, super fascinating character. Anyway, that's all of the major lore stuff for this video. I'm quite pleased with what we got for how tiny this pack is, considering that there's very, very, in the grand scheme, if you're just looking at raw text, there is not that much new lore actually introduced with Bhashiva and the Tiger Warriors. But what is there is really, really interesting, and there's a lot of really good stuff. Like, don't get me wrong, I really wish there had been more. I wish we had gotten significantly more information on End. I wish we had maybe gotten some more details about Kamau. Was he like a full mortal normal guy? And then maybe he turned out to, and then he like ascended to the etheric plane, like ascended to be among the 1,000 gods. I really would have liked to know more about the 1,000 gods. Obviously the end stuff is pretty scant, but what we do have, I do think is very, very interesting. So I just wanted to kind of put out a video to sort of update my thoughts on all of that. Now that this article is out, very, very interesting stuff. I'm super excited to chat with Andy about it over on Lorebeards and see what we can sort of pick apart and make work. And I hope you guys will join us for that. Though, honestly, by the time you see this, it'll probably already be out. So, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time.